What's up, everybody? Welcome back to some more Chad Daybell breakdown. We are going to talk about some chaos that happened yesterday at the lunch break when John Pryor, Chad Daybell's attorney, tries to serve a witness with a subpoena while she is on the stand. Can you do that? What happens if they refuse it? We will break that down, as well as a very weird and wild phone call that Melanie Gibb, the witness that's going to be on the stand for the entirety of the video today, recorded secretly of Chad and Lori and her to give to the police to help set them up, basically. And then John Pryor's cross-examination of Melanie Gibb, where he accuses her of planning this with Lori Vallow and not Chad Daybell. So get your questions ready because we've got a lot to talk about today. So we are going to start with what most of you asked me yesterday, in addition to, of course, the hearing that happened at the end of the day, which we covered at length and in detail in yesterday's video, last night's video, I should say. But this was the second most requested thing, which is what the heck happened during the lunch break? How is this possible? Is this proper? Is it improper? Well, we're going to get the breakdown from Nate Eaton, who was there. He's going to explain what he heard the scuttlebutt happened during the break. Just from my overview, it sounded like Melanie Gibb, who's on the stand, who's a main witness for the state, and John Pryor, Chad Daybell's attorney, has said she's going to be the key witness. She is, not trustworthy. Now we know later on you're going to hear him actually accusing her of being in cahoots with Lori Vallow and not Chad Daybell. But he has been trying to subpoena her to call her as a witness. We'll talk about why he might want to do that. And it turns out he tried to do it during court while she was on the stand during a break. So let's hear what Nate Eaton said happened at the courthouse. This was yesterday.
Okay, so this is the morning session. Now, normally every day around 10 o'clock, we have a break for about 20 to 30 minutes. Today, someone's phone alarm went off during the morning session, and the person didn't claim it. Like normally, you kind of hold it up in shame and say, here, it was me. So because of that, the bailiff held us after the judge said go on break. So everybody in the audience was held in the courtroom while he told us to shape up and turn off your phones. While this was happening, and he swears to me, the bailiff told me he did not purposely hold us back. He had no clue what was going on. But a lady I won't name her, but I know her, and she gave me the tip. She was outside in line waiting to get in for the next part of the court hearing. So you can't, if you leave, you can't go back in. She was waiting. She told me that right when that morning session ended, Pryor came running out and said, where is he? Where is he? And then Melanie Gibb left the stand, and a bondsman or somebody came up to try to serve her papers and said, ma'am, these are for you. These are for you. Gibb said, I'm not taking those. Pryor said, you have to take them. And then the prosecutors walked out and said, she doesn't have to take those while she's on the stand. What? So this happened out there right in front of the courtroom. The attorney started to talk. And then after we went back in, the judge called them all back into his chambers for a discussion. We don't know what happened with the discussion. So many of you were saying, well, how could she was already on the stand? Why would John Pryor try to serve her with a subpoena?
Well, interesting question, Nate. Let's go ahead and answer that one first. We'll talk about whether it's proper or not in a second, but why would he want to subpoena her? We have already seen throughout this trial that John Pryor likes to tell the witness on the stand that I have you under subpoena. I can just call you later if I want to. Additionally, if the state objects to outside the scope of direct examination, John Pryor can say things like, well, I already have him under subpoena. Additionally, the judge has already basically, in my opinion, tipped his hand that Pryor is going to probably call some witnesses that he's going to be able to treat as hostile and ask leading questions anyways. So if he has them under subpoena, it does create more leeway that you might not have. But I think the number one reason is John Pryor loves to say in front of the jury, I have you under subpoena. If you're not going to answer it now, or if the judge doesn't let me ask a question, I'll just bring you back in here and ask you then. He loves to say that. And that's the number one reason why I think he wants to subpoena Melanie Gibb.
He's on the stand for the state. And there are rules like whatever the prosecutor asks, they can ask whatever because she's their witness. John Pryor can cross-examine, but he has to stay within the bounds generally with the topics. He has to stay within the bounds the prosecution has said, or they can object and say it was out of the scope.
And that only goes so far, especially in criminal cases. A criminal defendant, as we've talked about in all of these cases, has so much more leeway than a prosecutor or civil attorneys in a civil case. So if a criminal defense attorney wants to cross-examine a witness on something that's relevant to his client's case, judges usually let him do it, even if it's outside the scope of cross. or the scope of direct, because if you're asking like, yeah, Chad Daybell did this, he was talking to all these people, and you want to cross him about something Chad Daybell said over here, it's like, is that really outside the scope of direct?
Sometimes it's very broad and it's all over the place. Just sometimes it's, they'll object and say it's beyond the scope. So Pryor was obviously trying to serve her with the subpoena, what one would imagine, to be his witness so that he could call her back and testify on what she saw on behalf of the defense. And it appears she has avoided getting that subpoena for years. Mark Means, Lori Vallow's old attorney, tried the same thing during Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing in 2020, August of 2020. A bondsman showed up at Melanie Gibb's hotel, tried to serve her with a subpoena on behalf of Mark Means and Lori Vallow, and Gibb refused to take it. I wish I could have been in the hall. That would have happened in front of all of us, and it would have been something to see. So, as if we thought that was the wild moment of the day. No.
So that's what happened. And some very interesting facts that Nate brings to the table. Obviously, he's been covering this from the jump. Let's take a look here at the Idaho rules of criminal procedure for subpoenas. And it talks about service. A subpoena may be served by a peace officer, by the officer's deputy, or by any other person who is not a party and who is at least 18 years old. Service of a subpoena must be made by delivering a copy to the person named. Place of service. In the state of Idaho, a subpoena requiring the attendance of a witness at a hearing or trial may be served at any place in the state of Idaho. For taking deposition, place of examination, when an order has been entered by the district court authorizing the taking of deposition, the clerk must issue a subpoena requiring the attendance of a deponent witness. And then contempt. Failing by any person to obey a subpoena served on that person may be deemed a contempt of the court from which the subpoena was issued. So, very interesting little conversation here, because I am under the impression you can serve witnesses at the courthouse and you can serve them even when they're on the stand. Now, if they have a legitimate reason why they can't appear in court, that's something they can take up with the court. If they think you're not giving them notice or enough time to respond or opportunity to respond, fine. But you can't just dodge service like this, because the criminal defense attorney can then call their process server to the stand and say, we were standing right there, we were handing them, she refused to take them. And the judge can actually have an order to show cause, like we saw in the other scenario yesterday with the lawyer that tried to intervene in the case. And he could make Melanie Gibb show up and say, why did you not accept the subpoena? They have subpoena power. They can force you to come testify. So I'm very interested to see what happened in chambers and how they dealt with all of this, and if John Pryor is in fact going to be able to call Melanie Gibb to the stand during Chad Daybell's case in chief. Because I'm not aware of any rule that does not allow him to serve her while she's at the courthouse. Now, maybe in Idaho, they don't let him serve him while they're, on a break while they're on the stand, and he could serve her after and have his process server waiting outside the door for when she steps off the stand and walks out. But in my opinion, that's all just semantics, and she shouldn't be able to dodge a subpoena. Regardless of what you think of John Pryor, Chad Daybell, criminal defendants, whatever, they have subpoena power. Yes, you can serve subpoenas while you're in court. Dee Marie, she's probably avoiding it because she doesn't want to testify at Chad Daybell's case, I guess. I don't really know, because I think he could ask her just about anything on cross. Jay Antoinette said, sorry if it's a dumb question. Can a witness in a criminal trial be called for both the state and the defense? Absolutely. How good or bad is it for either side? Sometimes they just have something they want to ask, like we discussed before, and if it's outside the scope and more along the lines of what they want to talk about in their case in chief, they can call them as their witness. It happens all the time. Mary M, yes, you can just be subpoenaed like that, and it does happen all the time. All the time. Now, if he did something improper as in part of that service, the judge may not allow it. But you are allowed to serve a subpoena on somebody who's trying to dodge service if you see him at the courthouse. I mean, for me, that feels better than doing it right in front of their house or on their yard, right? It's a public place. It's the courthouse. All right. So I wanted to hit that because so many of you had questions. But now I want to jump into some very important evidence by the state, which is a recorded phone call, which is apparently not illegal in Idaho. I haven't seen anybody say it is, at least, where Melanie Gibb calls Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell to set them up, basically, because she wants to give this to law enforcement And we'll hear why. And it really comes back to, I think she's trying to clear her name because she lied at the behest of Lori Vallow and said she had JJ when she really didn't. And so she wanted to show the cops, I'm really not involved. I didn't have JJ. I thought I was doing the right thing, but actually I wasn't. Let me prove it to you with this recorded phone call. So we're going to listen to about the first 15 minutes of this recorded phone call. It is weird, but you get kind of the vibes of this trial and some of the things they're talking about and some of the topics that are coming up that the jury's going to have to deal with and try to make sense of.
Hi, Chad. Hey, Lori.
Hey, let me put on speaker.
Oh, okay.
So you can tell she's talking to both of them, which is important, obviously, because it's Chad's trial, not Lori's. I'm already starting to get messages of people saying, I hear a lot about Lori, and Alex Cox. I don't hear a lot about Chad Daybell. Do they have enough evidence for Chad Daybell? When are we going to start hearing more about Chad Daybell? So maybe from at least some people that are watching this stream, the defense is doing their job in trying to divert attention away from Chad.
All right.
We're enough with the phone. How are you guys?
Okay, how are you doing, babe?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks. I was wondering, where are you guys?
We're just hanging out.
Hanging out? Are you in Idaho?
We're in Idaho.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to ask you a question, if you don't mind, Lori.
Yeah,
I want to know, you remember we talked about JJ going to Kay's house, and you told me they went there, and now he's not there? I was wondering what happened.
well, I had to move him somewhere else because of her actions. So,
Was she doing something? Like, was she trying to come get him or something, or like trying to kidnap him?
well, she said that lots of times before, but,
Okay. When I asked Chad the other day, I was like, hey, where is JJ? And he said, for my security, he didn't want me to know. So is there a reason I should be in danger to know where he is?
no, it's nobody. It's his danger. It's the danger that there's people after me.
Okay.
So,
If you knew, that puts you in a danger.
well, just in a bad position. That's
Yeah, bad position.
everybody. If they don't know anything, then they don't have to say they know.
Right. So you're just worried. Okay.
I'm just
So it's very cryptic, obviously. No surprise there, but it continues.
to keep him protected and
We'll keep you protected.
keep everybody else.
I appreciate that. Well, I was wondering why you told the police why he was with me.
I just needed to have somebody so I wouldn't have to tell them where he really was because they were going to tell Kay where he is.
Oh, yeah. So is it?
So, and I'm going to point out here while we're listening to this, because one of John Pryor's points on cross was during this phone call. And again, this is the state's evidence for everybody asking if I just play cross, or this is the state's evidence they're presenting. Again, very good evidence for them. Makes Chad look horrible. He's right there next to Lori during this whole call. But one of John Pryor's points during this call was Lori kept saying, I did this. I told you this. I didn't want to say where he was. I had to protect him, not we. It's one of the things John Pryor pointed out. Is it important? I don't know. Will a juror think it's important? Who the heck knows?
Do you think it's like your family, or like your family, your dad, or those
Well,
people?
Well, not my whole family, but as you know, most of my family is working against me and
Yeah.
with her, basically.
Yeah. Is JJ safe?
He is safe and happy.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Are you afraid of anything? Like, are you afraid to tell me that you're just afraid that that I could be in danger? Like like I don't, like if I knew, like how could that hurt me? I don't understand how that could hurt me if I knew where he was.
Well, I'm just not telling anybody so that nobody has to say where he is or get questioned to where he is so I can keep him as safe as possible.
Yeah.
And again, these are the defendant and his co-conspirators' own words being used against them, that there's proof that they were not alive at this point. So these are just pure lies and cover-ups. And so who else could be to blame but the people that were benefiting from it financially and in their life? I thought some of the biggest evidence always, even from Lori Vallow's case, is when they called and were looking for places to live and they said, clean couple, no pets, no kids. It's like, how do you argue against that? It's very clear to me how they were setting up their lives and how every domino was following exactly how they needed it to be, alone together, doing their purpose and mission that, Chad Daybell is the one that knows the purpose. Chad Daybell is the one that tells everybody their mission. Chad Daybell is the one that explains light and dark. Chad Daybell is the one that says who the zombies are and introduces this. And if Lori Vallow and Melanie Gibb have a question, they ask Chad Daybell and he tells them the answer and how it all works.
Okay, I hope that he's okay. I hope you guys are okay. But I did have a question that I asked Al at one point, your brother, if I wanted to know, like where he was, and he said I did not want to know, and that he could not be found. So what does that mean?
That's also not good, right? I mean, how can you not start to figure out what's going on here?
I don't know if he would say that, but it's the same story. Like I don't even want Al to know. I don't want anybody to know, so that nobody has to be worried about it. I mean, nobody has to be questioned about it, so he can be safe.
Yeah. So how long are you going to be away for? Like are you ever going to be able to come out and come back to society again? Or are you going to keep, come back? I mean, like, what does that look like?
I will do whatever the Lord needs me to do every day. So
I just wondered if I was ever going to see you again.
Absolutely, you will.
Okay. So maybe when they're done chasing you, you'll be able to come out again, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous thing for them to be working with Kay to find me. There's nothing that's gone on that's, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're working with her in some dark capacity. The police are working with her in some dark capacity. There's no reason for them to be after.
In some dark capacity. A lot of talk about darkness and light and zombies. And Melanie Gibb made it sound like, from her testimony, Chad Daybell was absolutely the leader. And Chad Daybell's defense is he was manipulated by the beauty and, manipulation tactics of Lori Vallow. That's not how Melanie Gibb tells the story.
For me, in the first place.
Yeah, has she threatened you at all?
Yes, lots of times.
Oh boy, like what did she say?
Well, it's in emails and everything.
So like she said she was going to come take them, or she was.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah,
Nellie.
I know it sounds like it. I'm just worried for you guys because.
And she called her Nellie. And another big topic of cross-examination was Melanie Gibb. We're sitting here, the prosecutors, everybody's being like, these quacks, they don't know what they're talking about. All these weirdos and these cults, and they're guilty of committing these crimes. But you had a nickname, right? You believe in the light and dark. You believe in zombies. You believe in, multiple lives or whatever. You believe in all this stuff. It's not that crazy, right? There are plenty of people that believe it, right? There are different sects and different religions that believe things like this, right? You wrote some books too, just like Chad. He's not some weirdo sitting over there. He must be guilty because he wrote some weird books or had some weird beliefs. And he gets a lot of that out across with Melanie Gibb, and you can hear some of it in these phone calls. And I do think that is helpful for the defense. That some of the witnesses the state's going to call also believe some of these weird things.
He's missing, and
I know exactly where he is. He's perfectly fine.
Okay, well, I hope so. I had a scripture I wanted to share with you, if you don't mind.
I'd love it.
I was thinking about some of the things you guys have gone through, and I saw the scripture today, and I want you to.
Let me ask you a question about the scripture. Okay. So, did Alma turn himself into King Noah, or what was he required to do?
Well, King Noah was incredibly wicked.
Yeah.
So he fled his evil ways, which is adultery and living riotously and breaking all the commandments.
Right. So what was he required to do, Alma?
He had to go and flee so that he would be safe, and then help other people realize how jacked up the system was and the government was.
What about Moroni? What was he required to do at the end?
To carry on those plates and bury them. That was his responsibility.
What did he have to do to do that? Did he hide?
He had to hide. He had to hide because they were so. Everybody was killing everybody in the society. Everybody was dying. They were killing all the Nephites.
And the scriptures had to hide in the cavity of a rock by day and go out by night.
The prophets did.
They did.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for sharing that with me. Okay. This scripture is just something that may be thoughtful for you. For behold, this is Doctrine and Covenants, section 3, verse 7 and 8. It says, for behold, you should not have feared man more than God, Although men set not the counsels of God and despise his words, yet you should have been faithful, and he would have extended his arm and supported you against all the fiery darts of the adversary. He would have been with you in every trouble. So when we work with the Lord and are obedient, he's going to protect us from adversarial darts and all kinds of negativity. But when we open the door to Satan, he comes in and then he attacks. And then he takes away to make it look like somebody else took it away. But that's not how God works. He doesn't work in darkness.
I agree with you 100%. And that's what the Lord is doing for me. Exactly what he's doing for me.
They're both trying to use their scriptures in like passive aggressive ways to, try to make their points and try to show shade that the other person is doing and why they are doing it and why they can justify it. And that's just an interesting little look into their relationship, because Melanie Gibb was on the inner circle. She's one of the light people doing the castings of trying to get the zombies out of Charles Vallow and the kids and everything. She was involved in all of that. So she's very close to the fire. Did she get burned is the question.
Oh, it just
We
sounds
have not
weird.
opened the door for darkness, Mel. Darkness is knocking on the door all the time because that's the way dark works with the light. And I promise you that I have done nothing wrong in this case, but sometimes you have to hide in the cavity of a rock for your own life safety. And that's what the Lord requires of you sometimes. And that's how it is. And I'm sorry that's how it is, because there is a lot of darkness on the earth.
I know.
That's coming after me for zero reason, besides the darkness of Kay, which you already know she's dark.
I haven't met her enough to know if she is dark or not. I've just met her slightly, and she seemed like a normal kind of person, but then I haven't engaged with her that much, so I don't know that personally.
So you don't know about her changing the thing for herself to be the beneficiary of the policy and all that stuff. None of that's dark, right?
Well, I haven't seen those documents.
So that makes her dark. If she comes after your pocketbook, changes the policy so she gets Charles Vallow's life insurance money and I don't get it, she must be dark, which you can clearly see. And Melanie later in the video is like, later in the call is like, you guys do stuff that's beneficial for you. You can say it's for the kingdom or for whatever all you want, but it really seems to be what you guys want in the flesh.
Documents, so I have no way of knowing.
I've seen them on my computer.
No, I have not. I haven't even looked in on your computer before. You haven't showed me
I don't
anything.
being controversial to me, or if you're recording this conversation for the police or whatever. I don't know what your intention is on this phone call.
Well,
but I love you with all my heart, and I have forever, and I will always love you.
I appreciate those words, but if you really loved me, you wouldn't have told the police that I had JJ with me.
That's a good point.
That's not what a friend does. I mean, that just makes me look weird, and it's not safe for me. That doesn't look good. I mean, you had to think of my welfare if you love me.
I do, and I did exactly what I felt the Lord was instructing me to do. And I appreciate you, and I love you.
I'm
And
just.
I never do anything to harm you. And you can have all of this confirmed to you by the Lord.
I have, and my conscience is clear. I feel very understanding what's really going on, Lori. And I believe that you have been very deceived by Satan. I believe that he has tricked you.
She believes she's been deceived by Satan. Obviously, Lori's not happy to hear that.
And I don't believe that what you're doing is correct. I just don't. I mean, Tammy dies, and then your husband died, and then he's missing. It just doesn't sound like God's plan to me. It gives me a gut feeling, like in my gut, it feels weird. It doesn't feel right. I don't have peace about it. I never have felt 100% peace about it. I always felt like a little weird in my stomach about all these things.
You know me, Mel. You know me. This does not sound like you. This sounds like you've been influenced by somebody dark who wants you to.
So once you disagree with them, you must be being influenced by somebody dark.
Believe dark things and have fear of the celestial world.
I don't have fear.
You obviously do.
No, I have a peace of conscience, and I can see clearly.
Well, I'm sorry that
Imagine being on a jury hearing this for the first time. I know a lot of them probably have some exposure to different parts of these religions, but I mean, to hear it legitimately from people's mouth for the first time. Tina said, Peter, do you think the prosecution needs more evidence on Chad? I think they have a lot of evidence on Chad. I think they need to do a better job of focusing in on, let's hear his voice. Let's hear what he did. Let's hear his connections. Let's hear what he got out of it, and a little less about what Lori got out of it. I do think they've got to be careful about towing that line. Denise said, is Lori allowed to watch the trial in jail? I don't think so. I would be surprised if she was.
I feel that way. I love you so much.
I know you do. I don't know what else to say.
Stand Christ, when he comes again, and he's coming soon, and we will all stand there, and you will know at that point that he has supported me and has supported me the whole time, and I have not been deceived.
I just want to testify that I know Tammy plus the conspiracy theories. My sister-in-law's right behind it all, and I hope that you're not being influenced by that dark team.
I don't know who.
So then Chad pipes in and says, I know there's like conspiracy theories about Tammy. Well, they're more than conspiracy theories now. They are criminal allegations. And it's started by her sister and that dark team. Hopefully you're not influenced by that. So that to me is important. And that's why this is good evidence against Chad Daybell. He's right there. He's listening. And he doesn't talk much about the kids, but when it comes to, stuff he's getting accused of, he's like, well, let me pipe in and say, hopefully you don't believe any of that.
She is. I'm sorry, you said your sister-in-law? I don't even know her.
I know, but she's coming up with the same type of theories.
Mhm.
And it's just not true. My own children were there. They testified that Tammy had been getting weaker and sick, and I begged her to go to the doctor. Her heart was failing her. She was physically falling apart, but she hates doctors, and
Mhm.
she just passed away.
Now, it is also convenient for the defense that that's the same defense they're going to use today. That Chad Daybell said on a phone conversation way before any charges were filed, and they're sticking to that same defense. And he didn't know he was being recorded, which gives it a little bit more reliability.
That's how it happened. My son Garth was right there with me the whole time. My kids were at the house within 20 minutes of her passing. They covered 2 corners. They checked her out right there on the bed. All these
It
conspiracy
does sound like he's got all the evidence lined up. He's got his argument all lined up, right? And it's very similar to what it's making in trial today. So we'll see if it comes out to work.
theories just make me sick to my stomach. Just absolutely sick. I know I've been told for years that Tammy would pass away at a young age. And I had no idea that Lori would even be a part of my life. I just knew that my life had 2 segments. And that I know Tammy's on a special mission and she's with my kids. She's visited them. There's so much, Melanie, that you just have to have faith. And this is not some sort of master plan. There's no way Lori and I should ever come up with this. It's just.
You can understand my concern, correct?
I can from an outside perspective, but from
someone who knows as much as you know, no, not really. But we can feel Dave's influence on you. I can feel that.
From someone who knows as much as you know. Interesting little tidbit there.
For sure.
He's a very good man, and he has a very strong foundation. That I know.
I know, but he seems to be the one that's putting the doubts in your mind.
No. You know what? I have come to understand that my gut feeling, I was not listening to it, and I always felt uncomfortable with many things.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry that I included you in those teachings then for your own sake, because I wish that you didn't have as much knowledge as you have, because you will be accountable for the knowledge that you do have, no?
So are you.
And then they started like, I wish I didn't include you in this teaching. It's like, so now you're responsible. It's like, so are you. It's like very cringy conversation. It continues for a few more minutes. We're going to jump ahead now to some cross-examination yesterday, and we're going to listen to some of the cross-examination today as well of John Pryor crossing Melanie Gibb. And it is important that he points out, she again is involved in a lot of this. He points out what Izzy said here. I find Gibb to be a very unreliable witness with selective memory. Pryor did a good job highlighting it on cross. Appreciate your input, Peter. Thank you, Izzy. And yes, that's a huge point of the notes I wrote down as well. She even admits that she has bad memory, but she was very specific about details on direct, which we've seen in other witnesses. And I wrote down some quotes that I literally couldn't believe. It made me almost chuckle, where he was like, she would say, Chad was there. And John Pryor would say, is it possible he wasn't there? And she goes, I guess it's possible. And then she's like, John Pryor's like, did you talk to this guy? And she's like, no. He's like, is it possible you talked to him? She's like, yes, immediately, without hesitation. Just saying 2 completely different things. Like, yeah, it's possible I'm completely wrong in what I'm testifying to under oath right now. Very, very weird kind of throughout. And then you had a lot of objections, which you guys had questions about. And John Pryor will say something like, from my understanding, when I listen to it, it really sounds like you say I a lot. Objection. The counsel's testifying. Yes, sustained. The correct way to ask the question, which Pryor would eventually get there most of the time, is Lori said I a lot, right? So don't say what your perception is, what you heard as the lawyer, what you think is happening as the lawyer. just ask the question. It can be a pointed question. It can be a direct question. It can be a leading question, but you just can't add a whole bunch of testimony before you start asking the question. So a lot of times he just asked the question the wrong way. Substantively, what he was asking was fine, but procedurally, the way he was asking it didn't make sense and was appropriately sustained by the judge. Okay, we're going to jump in here. Oh, another thing. So a lot of people were asking, John Pryor was trying to get Rob Wood, the prosecutor, to have to take the stand to talk about these text messages. And I said, when I answered some of the DMs and stuff, it's like, I would be really shocked if he could ask the state attorney to take the stand, but I wouldn't be shocked if he could ask the witness about those text messages. How much was the state prepping her? How much was he telling her what to say? We've heard this in other cases, and this is the exchange between Melanie Gibb and John Pryor about those text messages with prosecutor Rob Wood. I also think it's very weird how she calls him Rob very comfortably. Anna, this is classic narcissistic personality disorder speech. Deny responsibility, minimize, and reverse the role of victim and offender. Terry said, I love the love bombing Lori does is crazy. Did the same thing with the call with Colby. I love you so much. It's nauseating. She definitely has a way of communicating with people. And she definitely, again, that's why I think this was always the best defense. This was always the best theory. Point the finger at each other. Call each other manipulative, because they both sound really manipulative in what they do, especially Lori in some of these phone calls.
I'm not protecting it.
Okay. So during the process of preparing for this case, you had an occasion at or around the time of the initial preliminary hearing to engage in discussions with Mr. Wood about your testimony. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay, and that was started in about May of 2020. You recall that?
it could have been. I can't recall the date.
Okay. And it ended somewhere around November of 2020, right? You don't
I
remember?
don't remember.
Would it help if I showed you some correspondence between you and Mr. Wood to refresh your recollection, or do you remember having a discussion with him during that time?
I remember talking to him often. I mean, you can ask me what I shared, but I don't, the dates, I don't need dates.
Okay, you do remember that there was pretty consistent email communication for a 6-month period between the two of you, right?
Email?
I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I said email, didn't I? Text messaging.
It was some text messaging.
Some text messaging?
Yeah.
Would it surprise you to learn, and if we need to refresh your recollection, I can stop things. Judge, it'll take me a little while to get them hooked up, but would it surprise you to learn that between May 20th, May 6th of 2020 and November 4th of 2020, the two of you exchanged text messages between you over 340 times?
It's possible. I ever
6 months, 340 text messages with a prosecutor on a case that you're a witness. This reminds me of the Rust trial, when everybody was trying to not get charged and not get in trouble, and they wouldn't stop contacting the prosecutor. John, interesting. A DA can't be a witness. They can, but under very extenuating circumstances, not just to testify that they were prepping a witness or texting with a witness. There has to be more there. I don't know what happened in chambers or some of the off-camera discussions, but it seems like he's not going to be able to call Wood at this point.
really don't know.
Okay, would it help to refresh your recollection if I showed you all 340 of those text messages?
No, I mean, I know we communicated it. And
Okay.
you got what you got.
Okay, and you acknowledge that during that time, there was a considerable amount of communication between you and Mr. Wood. Would you agree with that?
I say it was more often in the beginning.
Okay. Would you dispute that there were 340 texts?
I don't know. It's
Okay.
possible. I really don't know.
And one of my concerns is that about that communication is
It's possible. I really don't know is like an answer she gives 100 times. So here's going to be an example of John Pryor asking the question the wrong way.
It's
Okay.
possible. I really don't know.
and one of my concerns is that about that communication is
Objection, Your Honor. I'd move to strike the narrative that started that question.
One of my concerns about this is like, no, you don't get to testify to your concerns. Just ask the question.
at any time during that communication with Mr. Wood, did you suggest to him that you needed to protect either a person or an organization as part of whether or not you were going to testify or what you were going to testify to?
No,
You don't remember that?
no, I didn't. No, what I'm saying is no, I didn't. My intent was not to protect anything other than to share what I knew.
Okay. So if I were to show you a text,
So he's going to start to argue that she was trying to protect the church, and she and I think Dateline. So he also tried to make her look bad that she was talking and doing interviews with Nate Eaton and Dateline NBC and all of that.
message that suggests something contrary to that, would that refresh your recollection?
I don't recall it, so I could care either way.
Judge, could we take just a short moment for me to, I'm not gonna be able to refresh a judge up on the screen, so I don't know how you want to do this. I can either bring her this laptop and show her the text message, or however you would like.
So they go through procedurally how they want to do this. I'm going to skip ahead a couple minutes.
Someone in this case?
That sounds familiar.
Okay. Refresh your recollection about discussing protecting someone in this case?
That sounds familiar.
Okay, and in this particular instance, isn't it true that when you were communicating with Mr. Wood, you mentioned to him that you and Mr. Morrison want to make sure the church is protected, right?
Well, I think in my feeling, what it meant to me is that when we talked about these things, that we would share that this was not the teachings of the church. So that's what I meant by it.
No, it wasn't that what you were trying to do is you were going to testify. It wasn't that you were trying to testify in a court of law or in talking with Mr. Morrison and not disclose too much about some of the secrets of the LDS faith. Is that what you're telling me?
No,
You were trying to protect some of the secrets of the LDS faith from
No,
being exposed?
no, I'm sorry. I guess it's the way you're phrasing it.
The secrets of the LDS church from being exposed. I think we can tell a lot more in this trial than Lori Vallows that Chad Daybell is trusting his attorney to just give the best defense he can. Everything else be damned is what it sounds like.
Okay. So in other words, what you're saying is that you were just wanting to be careful about what you said when you're talking to a prosecutor in a criminal case. Is that what this means?
I'm not sure how you're explaining it, that you need to be more clear with me.
Okay, I'll be really clear. You and Mr. Morrison sent a text to a prosecuting attorney, correct?
I don't know who sent that. I'm sure I'm not that text, even though I guess I didn't understand. Was I texting that to Rob? I'm not sure.
Well, Judge, I think what I'd like to do is have the bailiff come back up, take the document, have her look at it and see who it was from and who it was to. And then after you do that, we'll take a look again.
I'll permit that. So, Mr. Bailiff, if you'd please retake this paper not yet admitted.
You would, and he'll return it to me. Guy from Dateline and I, right? The text you talked about, Keith, the guy from Dateline and I, right? And is that the Keith Morrison? Is that the guy we're talking about?
Yes,
Okay. I want to make sure the church is protected. Do you recall that?
yes.
He has done a good job so far. That's why I feel comfortable talking to him. Is that what you said to the prosecutor?
I think so. Yes,
Okay. Is there any reason to dispute what I just read is not what you read just 2 minutes ago?
yes, that's fine.
So the question I have with that is, if what you're saying is that, well, you wanted to get the story right in terms of the beliefs of the LDS faith, why are you sending that to a prosecuting attorney who's prosecuting Chad Daybell?
Are you finished?
I am finished.
A little bit of an awkward silence there, but it's a good question.
I'm waiting for an answer.
I felt comfortable talking to Rob to let him to know what I was doing.
Again, Rob. I asked Rob this. I don't remember what Rob said. I felt comfortable with Rob. It's a little weird.
I just felt comfortable sharing that just to let him know what I was up to. Yeah.
So you were sharing with Rob Wood, the prosecuting attorney, that it's your intent to protect the LDS church with your testimony, right?
I guess you could say that.
Okay.
That wasn't the whole point of the interview, but
I understand that.
Yeah.
The point of this text was that, right?
I guess so.
And the 340 other texts between May 6th of 2020 and November 4th of 2020, were those just to say hi?
No,
Okay. So in other words, what was happening here is that there was at least some sort of a relationship built between you and this prosecutor about how and when and where you were going to testify about things in this case. Is that right?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony.
Sustained.
The point of all this communication between you and Mr. Wood,
I actually don't think he did. He was asking a question. He wasn't misstating testimony. He was asking, is that what was in these text messages?
prosecuting attorney in this case, was to establish how you planned on testifying in this case and what you were going to say.
It wasn't the established reason why I communicated with him.
And it was just a coincidence then that you happened to mention your church and how you were going to protect your church to the prosecutor who was going to be calling you and examining you as a witness in this case. That's just a coincidence, right?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
Fair.
Judge, I'm going to need to move for admission of exhibits 6 and 7. These are
So the admissions of these exhibits create problems we're going to discuss later, but nobody's safe right now with Chad Daybell and John Pryor. Not Lori Vallow, not Alex Cox, not Melanie Gibb, not the LDS Church. They're just aiming and firing at everybody at this point. So I wanted to play this part because, again, more of you guys had questions. It's not testimony, but it's some of the issues they had with the exhibits. And we'll talk about how this happened. And a lot of you have been asking, did Lori Vallow, or do they know about Lori Vallow being convicted for this? Do they know she's in prison? And we get some of those answers in this exchange that happened outside the presence of the jury.
Matter the court would bring up is that earlier in the trial, the court noticed that several of the state's marked proposed exhibits had reference as sort of Bates numbers or other markings on some of those exhibits that referenced the term Vallow/Daybell. The court raised a concern sua sponte about a possible appearance of the fact that in Lori Vallow's case, the trial's already concluded and she was convicted. I didn't want reference necessarily expressly on all the exhibits to that trial.
So they didn't want to reference it at all in any of these exhibits going back to the jury. Again, this is outside the presence of the jury. And some of the exhibits they put in had references to them, so they had to go back, take them out.
Some of the jurors may or may not know about that, depending on what they revealed in voir dire.
So not all the jurors don't know about it. Some of them may, and they asked follow-up questions about that. But any of the ones that don't know about it, they don't want to draw any attention or reference it at all. So they're not actually putting in as part of the case.
And so the state has thereafter, I think maybe one came in with a reference to Vallow on a Bates stamp. The state's been redacting those references as it relates to referencing Vallow. From the state, does anyone wish to mention anything further to clarify the record on handling those exhibits and how they've been admitted in the case?
No, that's an accurate representation, Your Honor, and we'll continue to redact those.
Okay.
If there's any left.
All right, so that's the issue there. On other exhibits that came in today, they were offered as defense exhibits 6 and 7. The court, in a sidebar, got together with the evidence clerk as well as staff attorney and counsel to look at those exhibits before they were admitted or published and make sure they were properly marked. It was pointed out that many or most of those exhibits contained improper dialogue, written expressions on them or labels that would not be admissible, descriptions, for example, that were argumentative. And so while the court is permitting the defense to go forward and those exhibits have been admitted, the court is going to ensure that before they're published, they will have those references removed, and we won't give those to the jurors for deliberation or publish them unless those references are not included in the actual exhibits. I did make a curative instruction as one exhibit apparently was published briefly to the jurors, and that was the basis of the court's curative instruction for the jurors to disregard that information that may have been descriptive and not evidence in the case.
I believe it's John Pryor writing inconsistent statements, and it actually went in front of the jury. And they, instructed the jury that that's not evidence. Obviously it's not, but again, that's not that big of a deal. It's not cause for a mistrial. You can actually do that in closing argument. You can make a slide that says Melanie Gibb inconsistent statements and write down all the statements, or use the documents or text messages or video, whatever it is, to show inconsistent statements. So it's not that big of a deal, even though no, it should not go back to the jury on evidence. They're also talking about some of the descriptions you can have on your exhibit list, like, pictures of the backyard, and remove that just to be called pictures. Like, take off some of the descriptive words, let the jury know for themselves or listen to the evidence and testimony about it when the exhibit comes in. So that's just, again, inside baseball stuff of why they're doing and talking about this stuff. But there was one more interesting exchange.
Does the state wish to make any further clarification on, well, I'll start with the defense because those were defense exhibits. Mr. Pryor, anything further on those exhibits and how they were handled today by the court?
Judge, a number of the exhibits have descriptions of what they are in terms of content. And I understand that what I understand is the court just wants the number and the sub number and delete all of the other descriptions, whether the court feels they're inappropriate or not the proper description of that exhibit. I can delete all of those.
Okay, and I do wish those to be not included.
Okay.
Anything further on that issue from the state?
Your Honor, with regard to that issue, I think the state just wants to clarify that the exhibit that was inadvertently shown is actually, to the state's knowledge, not an exhibit. It's not a stipulated to document. We had been talking about specific items that had been pulled from the Cellbrite or the iCloud accounts. The document that was published to the jury was not that. It actually made reference to grand jury proceedings, a preliminary hearing, and Lori Vallow's trial.
Brianna, they can't say convicted, but they can say lies. They can say the defendant's lies on a slide during closing argument for sure. If they have two inconsistent statements, or they say on the stand he said this, and then they play the video, I think that would have been great on Nikolai Mew's case. So yeah, you can create those types of demonstrative arguments in closing. They shouldn't come out like this. The judge did the right thing to give a curative instruction. I was just explaining why it doesn't rise to the level of if they would have showed them something where Chad confessed, but the judge had thrown out that confession, that obviously would have been a much bigger deal. And that doesn't exist. I'm just giving it as an example.
And then I think it had something marking inconsistent statements, and that was published to the jury. The state does have concerns about that. I recognize the court did give a curative instruction. I think at the outset of this trial, the court gave an instruction to the jurors they were not supposed to consider Ms. Vallow, whether she had a trial or what any outcome was of any proceedings, and they weren't supposed to speculate. So I think that has now been published to them. I recognize the court has given that curative instruction. It also came to the court's attention that maybe there was a comment made sometime around that same time from counsel to the bailiffs about not touching his computer. So I think we just wanted to make
So that last objection was she didn't like how Pryor told the bailiff not to touch Pryor's computer.
a record of that. But we do recognize the court has given that instruction, but for purposes of appellate reasons, we wanted to make sure that we had a clear record.
And Judge, in response, I don't know that there's anything appropriate for me to direct a bailiff not to touch my computer when I'm stepping away from the podium. In regard
Pryor says there's nothing wrong with me telling a bailiff not to touch my computer. Who do you agree with here, the state or Pryor? I'm going to give you my opinion after the judge makes his comments.
to the other things, Judge, somehow those statements may have inadvertently been exposed by way of I should have probably removed the HDMI cord, and I think they were reflecting some of my notes, so I can relay that, but there was no intent to publish that to the jury.
Okay, well, on the second to last point there, well, on your final point, Mr. Pryor, and what the state's argued, what was published, okay, I'll clarify, was not an exhibit, was not evidence. The court did give a curative instruction. It was inadvertently published by the defendant in this case. At this point, because it was published, all we can do is have that curative instruction and make sure we have additional instructions in our final instructions to the jurors that they are only to consider admitted evidence, and that they were specifically instructed that evidence is not admitted in the case, and leave it to the jurors to commit to following those instructions. So from what I briefly saw, I'll note it wasn't up there that long. I don't believe it created more of an issue than is necessary that could be cured by the curative instruction given. So I won't draw any further attention to it on behalf of the jurors hearing about it, other than a general new instruction that will come with them for deliberations about what may be considered. On the point of what apparently was said by Mr. Pryor to the bailiffs, I'll just indicate, of course, the bailiffs are in charge of the courtroom at the direction of the court, and I'll instruct all counsel to be respectful of the bailiffs as they do their jobs, and in particular, to not make any sort of comments in front of the jurors that may confuse the jurors or concern the jurors as it relates to how the bailiffs are doing their job in here. I have full confidence in the way the bailiffs have handled this courtroom throughout the trial. And so I'll just leave it up to counsel to follow that instruction as well. And
So the judge gets the backs of his bailiffs and court staff, which you don't, no surprise there, but he also didn't say anything that was wrong. Here's how it works. Number one, the bailiff should absolutely not be touching anything on the defense's table, on the podium, the defense's work product, papers, computer, anything. If something needs to be moved or unplugged, the bailiff should tell the defense attorney to do that. You need to move this laptop. Watch out. It's going to fall. The plug is about to fall out, because it's very important. And no offense to any bailiffs out there. I've got a lot of friends that are bailiffs and law enforcement officers and whatever. When you're in a situation like this, it's like you don't trust anybody. You don't want anybody touching your stuff, especially somebody that's a cop at the end of the day, right? It's like, just don't touch my stuff, please. But don't touch my drum set. That's what it makes me think of. But Pryor didn't do it the right way. Definitely don't do it in front of the jury. Absolutely not. Big no-no. But there's a hierarchy in the court. At the break, you say, Judge, the bailiff moved my computer. I don't mean any offense by this, but if you can instruct the bailiff not to touch any of the defense's exhibits or documents or computers, I think that would help the trial move along more quickly and everybody would be more comfortable with that. And then the judge, if it's appropriate, will instruct the bailiff what to do, how to act, admonish the bailiff if he needs to. But that's how it's supposed to go through that chain of command. That's really how it's kind of supposed to work. And I want to just play that to talk about that point because there were some questions on it as well. Ashton said, her testimony about protecting the church does not come off as weird. Chad had deviated so far. The defense attorney sounds unnecessarily aggressive. He would have lost me as a juror. Diane said, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Nothing that Daybell was teaching to his followers or putting in his books is part of the church's teachings and doctrine. A lot of people have been asking, saying they like Pryor or don't like Pryor. Maria said, how is Pryor still an attorney with an SA record? I haven't seen that this is true. I don't know anything about it. I don't want to talk about it because if it's not true, I'd feel horrible about it. Katie said, Peter, would she be considered a hostile witness, meaning Melanie Gibb? The answer to that is yes. Whether you like Pryor or not, and I don't know what's in his past, or if he's a good person or a bad person or anything like that, I think he's doing a good job for what he has. I think he's using potentially the best argument in defense that could possibly be made for Chad Daybell. And that's his job as a defense attorney. Is he doing it the best way? Is he asking perfect questions? Does the jury not like his attitude or his persona or his style? Maybe not. I don't know. But just legally and practically speaking, I think he's doing, especially if you compare it to Lori Vallow's defense. It's like night and day. It's like dark and light. All right. I'm going to jump ahead now to when he kind of goes at Melanie Gibb. And this is, I believe, the part where he basically accuses her of being involved.
Okay. She said again in the singular, I don't know why he would say that. Not we don't know why he would say that. It's I don't know why he would say that. Right?
Right.
Okay. Now, initially when the investigation started over the disappearance of JJ, and that was close to Thanksgiving time, correct?
Between October and November. Yeah.
Well, the end of November when the
Yeah.
police showed up, right?
Yeah.
You remember that, right?
We do.
Okay, so you do have a recollection of about that when this took place, right? Okay.
And he's a little
Um,
sarcastic and condescending because she literally says, I don't know 100 times on cross.
Basically, you received a call from the police, correct?
Right.
And initially, it wasn't that you kind of lied, you lied to the police officers. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So when you said you kind of maybe weren't truthful in the beginning, no, you lied to the police,
Sure.
correct?
Sure.
Okay. And then
So he says you lied to the police throughout her cross about 10 or 15 times as well.
after you told the police a lie about having JJ with you, correct? You then, after some more prompting from the police, you sort of cleared that up, right?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the prior testimony.
Sustained.
Okay, so how did that play out then after you initially lied to the police? How did it play out that you then
Literally every chance he gets, he says you lied to the police. And we know with Mew and with other people that have taken the stand, Alec Murdaugh, once you admit you're a liar, it's a lot easier for the attorney trying to pick your testimony apart to say, she admittedly lied about this. How do we know she didn't lie about X, Y, or Z? And a lot of you have picked up on that as well. And you don't trust a witness once they admit on the stand that they lied.
corrected yourself with law enforcement after your initial lie?
I went to see them personally and talked to them about everything I knew.
Okay. And that's when you realized that, oh, well, my lie to them isn't going to hold up. I better sort of tell them something else, right?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative and mischaracterizes the prior testimony.
Sustained.
And so the purpose of going back to the police was to clear up your initial lie, correct?
No,
Oh, it wasn't?
no.
Well, the purpose of going back to the police was to tell them what you felt they needed to hear, right?
I felt an obligation to share everything I knew with them.
Okay.
So he's trying to, make it seem like she lied. And then when she realized she might get in trouble for what she knows, she's like, you know what? I'm going to flip on them, even though I'm part of this. That's what he's trying to get at.
And I guess that obligation wasn't so strong when you initially told the police the lie that you had JJ, right?
It was a conflict within me.
Okay. And that conflict within you said, it's more important that I lie for Lori Vallow than it is I tell the police the truth, right?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative and misstates the prior testimony.
That is overruled. You can
So-
answer. Hold on, there wasn't an answer.
Sorry, Judge.
Sorry.
Do you need me to have her recite the question again? Mrs. Clerk, could you state the question for me, please?
And I don't know how to answer that other than say it was a difficult moment for me. And That's just what I did.
Okay, so is being here today a difficult moment for you?
Of course it is.
Okay, and you're having some struggles because,
It was a difficult moment before when you lied, and it's a difficult moment for you now. You see what Pryor's getting at. I don't know if the jury's picking it up, but that's what he's getting at.
you're having some struggles because at some point, you know you have information about JJ Vallow and about what happened to JJ Vallow, correct?
Best of my knowledge.
That's what?
Best of my knowledge, I'm sharing all that I know about.
So I want to go to the timeline of Chad Daybell a little bit.
Okay.
And you talk,
I'm going to skip ahead a little.
You're meeting with somebody for a full week and you don't remember all the conversations you have. You do your best to.
the JJ.
It's possible I did. I don't recall what I said to her when I came downstairs.
Okay. Well, you make a lot of comments, it's possible, but you don't remember asking to see JJ, do you?
I remember when you're meeting with somebody for a full week and you don't remember all the conversations you have. You do your best to remember all that you can recall.
Well, I appreciate that because, you know, in the beginning of your testimony with the prosecuting attorney, you were very clear about all of these memories that you had about zombies, about dark and light.
Objection, Your Honor. This is a narrative. Move to strike. It's argumentative.
Sustained.
I disagree.
You were very clear on your testimony about zombies. You didn't have a memory loss about that, did you?
No,
You didn't have a memory loss about dark and light, right?
no.
You didn't have a memory loss about how often you saw Chad, right?
Sometimes I remember seeing him. It wasn't a memorable weekend to remember when he came in and out all the time.
But you were very clear about all of the things that Lori Vallow told you at the bequest of Chad. You were real clear about that, weren't you? No?
I said, yeah.
Okay. Judge, I don't know if you want to, I unfortunately have quite a ways to go now, and I apologize to the court, but I got a ways to go.
Oh, you don't need to apologize, Mr. Pryor. We'll take our time to get through this witness, but we are.
All right. And then now we're going to jump to a little bit from today's cross-examination of Melanie Gibb, where it ended. And here are a couple more points that Pryor makes.
Chad Daybell contacted you and specifically asked you,
Loud, sorry.
where is JJ Vallow?
And no,
And yet, during that conversation, he told you that Lori was going to be contacting you, right?
that's right.
And then after that, did Lori contact you?
She did.
And what was the discussion, Miss Gibb?
She told me that the police had come asking for JJ and that she had told them that I had JJ and that I needed to go to a movie called Frozen, take some pictures.
Okay.
Back.
So your denial of the fact that Chad called you, you're denying the fact that Chad Daybell called you on the 25th, seeking out information as to where JJ Vallow is. You're denying that, right?
Yes.
Okay. But yet Lori Vallow calls you back after Chad Daybell and says, I need you to cover for me and tell that police that you have JJ Vallow, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But Mr. Daybell also during that conversation said, you're going to hear from Lori.
Correct.
Did Lori ever tell you, I told Chad that JJ was with you and go along with this story?
I don't believe so.
Okay. But you don't know for sure, do you?
I can't remember. I can't recall all the words I said to
Oh,
her.
okay. All right. Okay. Fair enough. And then was it that day or was it the next day that the police officers called you?
It was the same day.
Okay. And at that point, you told them that you had JJ Vallow, didn't you?
Not initially, but by the end of the day, yes.
Okay. You basically told them during that day that you had possession of JJ Vallow. Is that right?
I said I had him and then I didn't have him.
Well, no,
That's
we're
the
going to go
words I
one at a
used.
time,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Okay.
At the first opportunity to have discussion with the police and discuss where JJ Vallow was, you told them you had JJ Vallow.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm having some difficulty with the fact that Chad's trying to cover something up. And yet after a phone call from Lori discussing to tell them that you had JJ, you suddenly go along and say, yes, I had JJ Vallow.
Your objection. This is a narrative. I'd ask to strike.
Sustained.
And then at some point subsequent to that point, you decided to tell the police, well, I lied about this because I was having an emotional issue with how to deal with this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And how long did it take you for you to have that emotional reflection to go back to the police and tell them, I'm not going along with this lie that Lori and I came up with?
A few weeks.
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the evidence.
Misstates the evidence that she just agreed to, that it was a lie that Lori and I came up with. How long did it take you to go back on that lie Lori and you came up with? And she said a few weeks. So now he's really connecting the dots between Melanie and Lori.
Well, it's already been answered by the witness. It's late, overruled.
Okay. A couple of weeks it took you to decide that I better tell the police the truth, right?
Right.
Okay. And then at some point you said that you decided to go and, excuse me. You decided to go to the police to let them know what really happened. And that was the 2 weeks later, right?
However many times how many weeks, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And then at some point yesterday, you testified that without talking to any law enforcement, you then took it upon yourself to record the conversation between you and Lori, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Ms. Gibb, and that occurred on about the 8th of December of 2019. Does that sound correct?
If you're referring to the recording, yes.
Recording, yes. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do you recall having a call to Ray Hermosillo?
Yes.
Right. And what your testimony previously was, or yesterday, was that you didn't talk to anybody from the police department before you made that call, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the evidence.
Overruled.
You testified that you did not call or talk to anybody with law enforcement prior to recording that call to Lori Vallow. Is that correct?
Your Honor, again, I'm going to object. This misstates her testimony.
I'll sustain that objection.
Did you have any contact with law enforcement prior to making that recorded call to Chad and Lori?
I wasn't aware of the dates, so I'm not sure exactly when those dates were.
Oh, so are you saying you did talk to law enforcement?
I did.
Oh, prior to it, right?
I'm not sure of the dates.
Okay. Well, would it refresh your recollection that there were 2 calls to the Rexburg police with Ray Hermosillo on the 6th of December and the 7th of December? Does that spark your memory a little bit?
No, I don't recall the dates.
Okay.
It's just your
And he impeaches her a bunch of times throughout her testimony. And
As a result of this,
there was a little bit more I wanted to listen to here before we bounced.
issue between you and Lori, would that be fair?
Objection, Your Honor.
That the majority of the conversation was between you and Lori. Would you agree with that?
yes.
And that the only time Chad got on the phone call is when he was talking about, his premonition about Tammy, and that he feels that someone's trying to jump on him as a result of this issue between you and Lori. Would that be fair?
Objection, Your Honor. The call speaks for itself, and that misstates what was in the call.
Sustain.
But you would agree with me that Chad was really not a primary or significant portion of that call, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one of the things I took note of during the phone call was that Lori made the comment, "You more than anyone else knows the truth," when she was talking.
All right. Before we get to this part, which is John Pryor literally hurling the accusation at Melanie Gibb, I want to answer this question or read a couple comments and then answer a question. I think John Pryor is doing a great job. He should be aggressive. No juror should hold that against the defendant. Well, some people do. Some jurors do. Some comments in here do as well. A bunch of people also asking how he responds to objections. Do you think that's positive or negative? Because he kind of just rolls right into the next question. I think it's positive in that he's not fazed by objections, whether he wins or loses. But I think you don't want to be reprimanded by the judge like he was early on about moving on too fast or not letting the judge take a second to give his ruling. Okay. All right. Here we go. Let's listen to him now build up this crescendo to accusing Melanie Gibb of being the one who was actually conspiring with Lori Vallow to commit these crimes instead of Chad Daybell.
Now, one of the things I took note of during the phone call was that Lori made the comment, "You more than anyone else knows the truth," when she was talking to you. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Isn't it true, ma'am, that that was a way for her to hide the fact that, Miss Gibb, you and Lori Vallow know the truth about what happened to JJ Vallow on the 23rd of September, correct?
No.
Okay. How about the 22nd of September, ma'am?
No.
Okay. Isn't it true that Lori was being very vague on that phone call because Chad was there and she didn't want Chad to know that you were going to talk about the murder of JJ Vallow?
I have no idea what her agenda was.
Okay.
There's a little pause there. And he's like, isn't it true she was being vague and using code because she didn't want Chad to know Melanie and Lori's plans, right? Now, sounds like, it's a movie. Sounds like there's some double crossing, twisted action happening. But in reality, how does it help Melanie Gibb to get rid of JJ and Tylee? It's very easy to see how it helps Chad Daybell. I'm not sure what Melanie Gibb gets out of it. I know what Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell get. So while I get what he's trying to do and I understand the theory, I'm not sure how strong it is. All right. And I wanted to hit that before we went because I think that was part of his crescendo and what he really wanted to get to and what he's building up to and what he's going to continue to try to point the finger, not only at Alex Cox, not only at Lori Vallow, but also Melanie Gibb, which I think is one of the reasons why he thinks she is such an important witness for the defense. So it is hard to keep track of all this. Jen said, devil's advocate, she was there that weekend. What if she does know and Chad doesn't? And that's why that convo in front of Chad got heated. It's exactly John Pryor's point. You're not playing devil's advocate. You're playing defense attorney, Jen. That's his point. And it's up to the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that is not the case and that, in fact, Chad Daybell was conspiring with Lori Vallow. We'll see if they are able to do it. Azam said, off topic, Peter, will you join Rob's Friday night frenzy celebrating 2-year channel anniversary, 200,000 subscribers, and 40 years young tonight? I'm going out of town this weekend, so I don't know if I'll be able to. I have not heard about this, but I will send him my congratulations for sure. And I hope a lot of you can join him in celebrating that. All right. That's all we got. A little bit longer than an hour today recap. Make sure you guys send me the clips and questions that you have on social media. Make sure you hit the like button before you go on this video as well and subscribe to our channel. I appreciate everybody that's been along the ride for this trial and so many others, continuing to ask your questions. Give me your thoughts and comments. But until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.